Boris Johnson's grilling by the Privileges Committee has made him a martyr among his followers. This was Nadine Dorries on Talk TV.
I don't think there was ever a world in which this committee was going to find Boris innocent. The committee have demonstrated very clearly that they have decided early on to find him guilty. The committee knew that they had not a shred of evidence to prove that he misled with intent. They changed the rules, lowered the bar, and inserted the vague term reckless into the terms of reference. Boris Johnson will be found guilty by this kangaroo court. There is no doubt about that. And that in itself will be a disgraceful and possibly unlawful conclusion with serious reputational consequences. The substantial question is this: will they impose the 10-day suspension at the point at which they will find him guilty? Doing so would trigger a by-election and end the career of a former Prime Minister who got us through COVID, got us the vaccines, opened Britain up before other countries, giving us an economic advantage over the rest of the world, and led global leaders to support Ukraine against the invasion by Putin. It is unthinkable that they would do so. But if a committee is prepared to bend the rules and change the course of their investigation midway in order to find him guilty, would you put anything past that committee? I wouldn't.
Imagine someone bending the rules. Imagine a group of politicians bending the rules. Nadine Dorries is absolutely outraged. And who's she defending again? Oh, Boris Johnson, that guy who would never bend the rules. Unfortunately for Nadine Dorries, the general public don't seem to agree with her. This was on this week's Question Time.
You're the presenter, Fiona, but we could do a quick straw poll to see how many of the audience think Boris Johnson could come back.
Let's just think about this for a minute. I mean, we can do a poll. It's not scientific. I want to emphasise that. There are more people in this audience, because this is the way the Question Time audiences are constructed, if you like. There are more people in this audience who voted for Boris Johnson, for the Conservative Party, than for any other single party here. So let's have a show of hands, shall we? Who believes Boris Johnson was telling the truth yesterday?
Wow.
Okay. Wow. Who believes there is a way back for Boris Johnson now? Right, one hand. So let's hear from you.
It's like them saucepans, isn't he? Nothing sticks to him, so he's probably going to come back anyway, isn't he?
So the one person who thought he could come back didn't have a particularly complimentary view about him. I mean, we talked a lot about people not believing Boris Johnson, I suppose. I think it's clear now a majority of the public don't. I suppose what that moment raised for me is, we talk a lot about sort of Trumpian politics in America, where sort of like most people don't really believe what Trump says, but there is this diehard group of people who do think the election was stolen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seems here that maybe no one is really on Boris Johnson's side, or potentially just that Question Time audience wasn't a complete representation of the public. I mean, where do you stand on this?
I think that's probably true, Michael, but I also think we have to engage with the possibility that a big chunk of people who did support him, and to a lesser extent still support him, there's far fewer of them obviously, were quite comfortable with the idea that the man is a liar. I think that's a big part of his vote. I don't think that the however many million people that voted Tory in 2019, 14 million people or whatever, all love the fact that Boris Johnson is a liar. But a big part of his personal political brand was the man was a scoundrel, a cad. And a big part of that is, of course, sometimes being rather economical with the truth. So I don't see these two things as necessarily, being at odds. This is somebody who had a pretty appalling CV and biography, sacked from multiple jobs, done some pretty unsavory things too, tried to organise, the beating up of a journalist to help out an old friend. And yet still, despite all of that, he became leader of the Conservative Party and later Prime Minister. So I don't see these two things at odds necessarily. I don't think he's coming back. I think he's deeply, deeply unpopular with the public. But I still think that the Boris stans, who do certainly exist, wouldn't really care if the chap was lying.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the societal division might not be between those who believe Boris Johnson and don't believe Boris Johnson, but the people who care if he's lying and the people who don't. I think there's definitely something to that.